Today's topic is freelance music careers and creating opportunities in a digital landscape. And our guest today is Lisa Lizanek. Is it Chapel?
Yeah, Chapel. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. See, I knew you when you were just Lisa Lizanek, not
Yeah.
the additional name. But she's a trombonist, educator, and content creator. She's someone that I have known for years in years now, although it's been a while since we've seen each other and worked collaborated with one another. For students that know my mysterious brief history in drum and bugle corps. Um, that's where Lisa and I first met, and we marched together in a in a drum corps on the West Coast. Um, and but I just want to welcome Lisa and just mention that she has a lot of really great things, I'm sure, to talk about in terms of her own career, and really excited to jump in because I think that she has a perspective that's very valuable to all of you that are in the field of performance and also in the field of education and really all and everything in between in this room. So let's just start by kind of doing a virtual round of applause and welcome our guest, Lisa. Okay, so again, welcome, Lisa, and I think I will just start with just our basic first question of like just if you could just introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your musical career. And I know that's a really broad question, so the sort of two parts, like can you talk about your musical background and origins and training, and then what also what sort of performance opportunities in the past and what you're currently working on have kind of shaped your career as a musician up to this point. So a lot to cover, I know, but feel free to dive in.
Sure. Yeah, that's definitely a loaded question, but I'll do my
Yeah.
best. First of all, I'm really happy to be here today. So thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you all. So my name is Lisa Chappell, or online I go by Lisa Liz, and I have created a musical career being a freelance musician. So, I guess let's go back to the music education and training. I started in high school band, which, as Dr. Nam mentioned, eventually led into drum and bugle corps. And that is really where I started to get very interested in music. So then I went on to school. I got my bachelor's degree in music education and then my master's in music performance, both from ASU, Arizona State. So I guess that was kind of my training, doing drum and bugle corps, and then going on to get some music degrees. As far as transitioning into the professional world, I would also say that going back again to drum and bugle corps, that's what kind of got me into that world. I started doing stage shows over in Japan from contacts that I had made doing drum corps. So that kind of got me started on the musical performance route, was just starting to do stage tours. And then everything just kind of went on from there. I finished my music degree and then I started freelancing in the Phoenix area. That was my hometown and where I went to school. Kind of my main jobs were I played in the pit orchestra at the Arizona Broadway Theater. So that was like a full time Broadway show kind of theater. We did 8 shows a week. So it was a lot of work. And when I wasn't doing that, I was also playing in all sorts of bands around town, like original rock bands, cover bands, top 40, you name it, that kind of stuff. And I also worked with some concert production companies all in the Phoenix area. And then I was always going on tour as well. I did live in Japan for a few years and did some other stuff over there. So, yeah, I guess that's kind of the Clip Notes version. But yeah, just I've been a freelancer. So, just whatever kind of musical opportunities came up, again, mostly in the stage realm or musical theater realm, has been kind of my specialty. So,
Yeah, fantastic. As you kind of list all of those things, one thing that is pretty obvious that strikes me and probably everyone listening is just how diverse of an amount of experiences you've had, as you mentioned, like on the stage and pit orchestras, and obviously your own solo performance, some chamber music, I'm sure.
mm-hmm.
So is that something that you intended on when you kind of made that transition to be a professional coming out of music school, or did it sort of organically happen?
That's a very good question. I would say it definitely happened organically. One memory that I will never forget, it was my freshman year at ASU, and we were having a brass area class. So all the brass studios were together. meeting for a class, and all the brass professors were there. And at the time, David Hickman was the trumpet professor at ASU. And he said to the entire brass, all the studios at ASU, he said, "You have a better chance at becoming a United States senator than you do at becoming like an orchestral musician or like winning a spot in a symphony orchestra in America." And I was just like, oh my gosh. So I always kind of had in my head, like from freshman year, that I was like, yeah, I don't think the orchestra thing is really for me. I'm going to like see what else is out there. And then I was also, it was in music school, I was encouraged by, some faculty members, specifically one of my hugest mentors when I was at ASU was Sam Palafian, who was the tuba professor there at the time. He always encouraged me just to always say yes, never be afraid to take that gig, take that opportunity. And he really encouraged me to play all sorts of musical styles. He was always introducing new music styles to me, and he was like, "You got to play in jazz band, you got to do this, you got to do this." So I think I had that influence while I was at college of just these, and the faculty there at ASU, a lot of them were soloists and they had had their own careers and they were doing this and doing that. So I'm happy to have had that influence like in school of like, you need to do everything. It was just always kind of taught to me. And then I started really seeing when you do just kind of like break free and start saying yes to stuff, it's just like it can just lead you down this path. It can take one person or it can take one gig to just kind of set you on this different trajectory. And I was kind of just never afraid to kind of just go with that trajectory, and just kind of see where it led me. And the more opportunities you get, the more people you meet, and then it all just kind of compounds on each other. So,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I think it also strikes me like you're kind of saying that versatility early on seemed to be um, kind of a priority within you, or at least that was sort of the influence of those around you, your
Yeah.
teachers, and what was said to you. Yeah, and I think it's fair to say that a lot of music students nowadays, well, I guess to back up, certainly in yours and my generation of students that come up through music school, and then certainly before that,
Mm-hmm.
there has been sort of this common, like almost myopic view of like, no, I need to do this and I have this goal and I'm singularly minded.
Yeah.
And like the opportunities or the things that you might say yes to that come up, and there might be a feeling that that is something that you do, but that's sort of in the way of this other thing that you're trying to do, or just something on the side. But it's interesting that you kind of accepted those things and said yes, and didn't think of like this was interrupting your career or just a side gig, but this is your career, this saying yes, and having this diversity. So I think that's a really good lesson. I think there's more we can touch on in terms of all the different types of experiences, but you also have in your bio and what you mentioned, education and music education as a feature of your career as well. So the next question I had for you was, how has music education and teaching in general been integrated into your career as a professional?
Sure. Yeah. I definitely, even though I consider myself mainly a performer, I'd say it's probably like about 80% of my work. I definitely still view myself as a music educator. I do have my bachelor's in music education. So, I did get that training to be a band teacher or a music educator, but I've always taught private lessons along the way. It's just always been something that's been a part of my career. When I was living and working in Phoenix, Arizona, I, had taught at some lesson studios there. I even worked with the Phoenix Symphony in their education department, teaching lessons out at the schools. And then since then, when I lived in Japan and now I live in the Seattle, Washington area, I have like my own private studio. So I've always maintained students. I've always had that be a part of what I'm doing, as well as I love doing, master classes and clinics and, even stuff like this. I consider this part of the music education kind of realm. So it's just always kind of been a part of what I was doing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think that that's another kind of thing that can be a common misconception, I think, where like, you're in the performance field, but it's probably stands to reason that you will have some element, even if small, that's involved with music education. So would you say that that's certainly been the case for you? Like, even if you didn't set out to do that, like you you kind of had education as sort of a thing that's recurring. Um, yeah, awesome. I mean, is there anything that to kind of branch off of that that you would give as far as like advice for students that might be forming or attempting to expand their own teaching studios if they like, definitely want to go down that path?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first off, now, if you're not yet, make sure you're
Hmm.
set up to teach online. That is where 100% of my lessons are now, is all online. So just kind of getting used to that platform. And I use Zoom mostly. So most of you are probably pretty familiar with that already. If you're interested in building a private lesson studio, I think the number one thing is just start with who you know. And that can even be, friends and family. Like I have some students that are, well, probably you guys are too young for this, but children of my friends, So it's start with who you know. Start within your family and your friends. And then beyond that, start with your musical contacts that you already have, right? So maybe go back to your old band directors or your old music teachers and really start from there. Or if you know any band directors in your area, all you have to do is contact them. You have to reach out to people. No one is going to like call, well, they might if you have everything established, but most of the time when it comes to freelancing, and I definitely consider setting up a private studio freelancing, right? You're becoming a freelance teacher. Most of the times people aren't going to call you. You have to set up that opportunity. So get in touch with the band directors or music teachers and just reach out to them. Send them an email. Tell them you're looking for students. It's just reaching out to who you know first and building from there.
Yeah, that's great advice. Excellent. As I think we all learn in this business, it really does boil down to who you know and these connections that you make, and that
Yeah.
really becomes a great deal of this full picture of our careers. Awesome. I mean, if you would bear with me, I think it would be good to kind of back up for a minute back to your performing career because you listed all these different types of things, and you mentioned that you've had lots of experiences on the stage and these various types of groups. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit more on the types of experiences you've had in terms of theater? I know you had some brass theater even, which is kind of a genre of itself. But can you just expand upon that element of your career?
Yeah, certainly. So, going back to the theater, when I was at Arizona Broadway Theater, that was, pit orchestra, playing the musicals down in the pit. I also did some pit orchestra work while I was in Japan. I did that as well. But the brass theater, like you mentioned, I don't know if anyone has heard of it, but there's this show called Blast. It was on Broadway about 20 years ago, and it was kind of like if marching band and drum corps went into the theater. So take like some elements from marching band and put it on a stage with the lights and the costuming and all of that. So I did the show Blast, and they also had a Disney version of that show. And then there was also a similar style show I did in Japan called Odyssey by a different company. And then I also started doing more stage shows like that in Japan. So those kinds of productions, they required a lot more than just playing music, right? The musicians were on stage, we had costume changes, we were acting, we were dancing, there was choreography. So it was very much not just being a musician, but having to be a performer, having to be an actor. So I definitely learned all those skills kind of from doing those style of shows.
Yeah, and again, that brings back the versatility thing. Was that prospect of having to learn all those other skills, was that daunting to you, or did you say like, did you welcome it, like bring it on? Just kind of wondering how you felt about that.
Yeah, I definitely remember it being kind of weird at first. Obviously, I could move and play at the same time from my experience. Again, in drum corps, I kind of learned that skill set. But then kind of adding acting and props and all this crazy stuff onto it. I will never forget it. One of my first blast rehearsals, it was my first year, and we were doing this number where we had to play while like doing choreography on chairs, like getting up on
Mhm.
chairs and spinning around while playing your instrument. And I just remember being like, this is crazy. Like, how the heck is anyone supposed to do this? And but then just kind of jumping in and doing it, and you kind of just start to practice that skill set the same as you would practice your instrument, or a 4-bar phrase that you practice over and over and over. You would practice playing with your trombone, standing up on a chair and balancing on one leg. And or the show I did 2 years ago, they had the trombone doing yoga poses while they were playing a solo. And it's just, just learning how to do it and just having fun. And yeah, again, I think it goes back to not being afraid to like try new things. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. I kind of want to ask about a feature of that experience, and not so much the theater aspect, but just the fact that you're in a different country.
Yeah.
Um, did you learn any lessons, or can you share any kind of um, experiences associated with just that idea of just having a career, performing career in another country? Is that challenging in any way? Was it just how was all that kind of received by you?
Sure. It's definitely an experience. I'll say that. I have been touring in Japan since 2008. And there would be some times where I would be living in the US, but go over to Japan to do a tour and then come back. And that was kind of like a introduction, I would say, because we all always had like translators with us or people who were kind of helping you out. And then in 2016, I actually moved to Japan and lived there for 4 years. And then that was like the real experience. It's like, okay, I live here now. I don't have a translator following me around. It's like, I just had to do it. So for the first year I was there, I had my nose in a Japanese book. I mean, I was studying Japanese like constantly, all day, every day, watching the shows and doing the textbook and taking lessons. And I mean, I was just like, I have to learn this language. So that's the number one thing. If you're going to live and work in a different country, you have to learn the language. You just have to. There's no way around it. So that was certainly a challenge. And I wouldn't say that I ever achieved any, close to fluency, but I did my best, learning the language and learning the culture. And it was hard. It was a challenge. One of the shows I did when I was in Japan was I was in the Japanese premiere of Mary Poppins that was in Tokyo and Osaka, playing in the pit orchestra, and I was the only non-Japanese person in the whole orchestra. So just those nerves of like being in a rehearsal and like I wasn't nervous about playing the trombone. It was like I was nervous about, oh my God, did I understand those instructions correctly? And so it was hard, it was difficult, but I wanted to play, so I knew that I had to just adapt, right? I just had to not be afraid to just get in there and do my best. So
Yeah, and I think all of this again kind of circles back to what you mentioned, and kind of reflecting that advice you got of just having that openness and being willing to say yes, and not only say yes, but like stick through difficulty. And one reason among several that I really wanted to have you speak to our students is just from afar, just looking at your career, it always struck me that like you are the embodiment of what you'd said of not waiting for the phone to ring and really trying to create your own opportunities, and being musically and artistically flexible. So I think that's wonderful and a good lesson for everyone. So I think that's perhaps a good bridge into my next question, which was what skills or attributes do you think performers need to succeed in the current 21st century landscape of the professional music field? Because as you said, you have a better chance of being a US senator than being, fill in the blank principal, whatever, of whatever
yeah.
symphony orchestra. So what do you think? What skills and attributes are essential, do you think?
Yeah, well, I think there's some skills and attributes that are never going to change no matter what time it is or what time period we're in. I would say the number one thing, practice. You have to get good at your instrument. That is just the given, right? That's never going to change. And you should certainly put in the time now when you're in college because believe it or not, I know most of you probably think you're super busy, but you're only going to get busier as your life goes on. There's always going to be more and more you have to do. So certainly practice, get good at your instrument. That is just hands down the number one thing. Other skills that I think are super important that you can start working on now are networking, right? Being able to contact people and not just contact people, but contact them effectively, right? So being able to make sure you're getting people's names and emails and information and making genuine connections with people. And again, you can start doing that now because your colleagues in college, your peers, they're going to be some of the most important people throughout your entire career. And then also just networking with all the professors at your school too, not just your teacher, but maybe anyone in the whole music school that you're interested in making a connection with. Start to make all those connections now. Also going hand in hand with networking, I would say you just have to be fearless. If you want something, you just have to go for it. You just have to send that email. Don't be afraid to send emails to people, or don't be afraid to go up to somebody and talk to them. You just have to put yourself out there. So definitely that openness to kind of put yourself out there. I had a professor in college. He told me to be a musician, you have to be a shameless self-promoter. You just have to be able to just, tell everyone what you're about and just go out there and just not be afraid. So again, I think those are skills that you can start practicing now. And then another really important one is just be kind, be nice, be professional, be a hard worker. Don't be a jerk.
Yeah.
You can just practice treating your peers and your colleagues and your teachers and everyone around you with respect. That will take you farther than just being someone who's a pleasure to work with and who's respectful and all those things. So I think those skills, those will never go away. You're always going to need all those skills. And then kind of moving more into the landscape we're in currently is, if you're not online yet, start thinking about that. I mean, I know you guys are all online doing stuff, but as far as like your music or creating some sort of professional stamp, I think you really need to start looking into that and doing that. So
Awesome. Maybe that's a really neat, a good bridge into the question I had about your online presence.
yeah.
So you are quite active on social media and YouTube. I've been looking over your YouTube channel in kind of preparation, and and it's great. And you have this kind of mixture of like kind of instructional based videos, but also videos that are just kind of like just fun and just you
Yeah.
playing and performing different arrangements of popular songs, pop songs, things like that. So can you share your thoughts about creating and managing an online presence as a professional musician today? Specifically any approaches you've taken or continue to take in order to best serve your career goals, or sort of like promote yourself or market yourself to your audience?
Yeah, definitely. So this has been something, as with a lot of musicians, I've gotten really into the past year. Honestly, just because I had more time, right? I'm not on the road, I'm not gigging, I'm not performing live. It was like, okay, so where am I going to put all this musical energy, right? I'm not jumping on the stage tonight, or I'm not, going on a tour. How am I going to play? Like, I think that's the thing throughout my career I've always come back to. Is like, I just want to play. I just want to play, So how am I going to play? I'm going to put it online. And I started my website, oh gosh, maybe a year or two ago. I knew that was a big goal of mine, just to like get a website out there. So I think that's definitely a good place to start, is getting a website, making this like base where you can link all your other stuff to. It's how people are going to find you. I would certainly say making a website was number one for me. So once I kind of had that, it gave me this platform of which to use, right? And it was also something that I could like share with people. If someone's calling you for a gig or something, you're like, oh, here's my website, right? It has your bio and any recordings. It's just like a digital representation of who you are. It's essential for business, right? Like, think of any other business that you frequent, whether it's a restaurant or whatever, you look at their website. So just kind of have that in mind. The next thing I did was I made a YouTube channel, and it's been a huge journey. There's a huge learning curve to it. So if you have ever been interested in starting a YouTube channel, my only advice to you is just do it. You just got to start, you just got to upload videos, and then you'll kind of learn from there and see which direction you want to go into. Again, YouTube channel linked back to the website. It's a good place for your music to live, your recordings to live, that you could, direct people to later. And then after I had those two things, kind of the next thing, which honestly, if I could go back and do it again, like I said, this is all trial and error. I've been learning this as I go, was like the idea of branding and coming up with a name and all that stuff. Probably talk to any business person and they're going to tell you that's the first thing you should have done. But this idea of viewing yourself not only as yourself, but like as a brand. So if you're going to be a musician, or if you're part of a musical group, or you're going to offer a product, like think of what that brand is, think of what your name's going to be, think of who your audience is going to be, all of those things. So that was kind of something I did more as an afterthought. I kind of went back and wait a minute, I have this website, I have this YouTube channel, I'm trying to link this. What am I going to do to link this all together? So the idea of like coming up with a brand, like for instance, the name that I go by online that I have all my stuff under is Lisa Liz Trombone. It's just easier to find. Then that brought me into the social media stuff, which of course I've always used social media, Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff. But I switched over all my social media accounts to like a business account. And then I also created a Facebook page that's separate from my profile, just something that can be kept professional and like for music. I stopped using Instagram to, share pictures of my cat and like what I had for lunch, and, directed it into, I'm sharing my music. I make almost all music posts now. I, include some personal content sometimes because people want to know about you as a person as well, but just kind of redirecting all the social media to have the same story and then linking it all together. Yeah, I've been finding, success with that. And I think it's just a way for people to find you, especially like we were talking about in this day, live performances aren't happening. People can't go to your concert. They can't go to your show. So what are they going to do? Where are they going to find you? They're going to go find you online. So it's kind of that idea.
Yeah, and I think luckily a lot of students, probably many students in this Zoom room right now, thought about creating their own website, or maybe already have, but maybe
Yeah.
I think what you mentioned in terms of like the intentionality behind it, of
Hmm.
not just having it a space where you sort of dump things, but actually kind of creating a continuity,
Yeah.
that sense of branding. Yeah, I think that's really interesting, really important. Um, I'm wondering, this is kind of off script. Have you encountered any particular challenges along the process of your creating your online presence, or perhaps your brand, that you'd like to kind of speak about?
Yeah.
Just kind of lessons learned.
Yeah, I mean, it's been one lesson after the other. Like,
Mhm.
I think this goes back, I guess this is a theme we're coming back to, just this idea of just not being afraid to just say yes and just do something. I've kind of definitely taken that approach with the whole online thing. I try to just be transparent about it. And it's just like, well, I'm learning this as I go. And I'm a big believer of the only way to learn how to do something is just to do it. And when you come upon a roadblock, then you just figure it out and then you learn. Yeah, I'm trying to think what some of the hard things have been. Just really everything. I have had to learn just in this past year or so. I mean, I've had to learn video editing and audio editing.
Yeah, I
And
was gonna say maybe the technology and
yeah,
like having the right equipment and all
yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's like every little step of it is a huge learning curve. So I definitely say probably the hardest things are, yeah, I'd say the video editing and the audio editing is probably what took the most amount of time, or learning new programs,
Mhm.
using Final Cut to edit videos, or trying to take my own photographs and then edit them, or, getting a green screen and studio lights and trying to edit videos. It's all been a huge learning curve. But again, going back to that idea of like, I just want to play music. And if this is what I have to do to play music right now, it's kind of like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. So it's kind
Yeah.
of the approach I've taken to it.
Yeah, and I guess, I mean, have you kind of felt or wrestled with the fact of like, okay, you have to balance all of that kind of administrative, logistical, technological side of things, with also with the fact that you have to take time to practice, right? Like you said, that never changes.
Yeah.
So it's like there's two equally balanced, or maybe one is more balanced than the other at various times. Would you say that's the case? And I mean, what is that interplay for you like?
Yeah, absolutely. And trust me, this is like an internal struggle I have daily, right? This is something, it's a very important point, right? If you want to be the best, I don't know, I'm just going to say trombone because I'm a trombone player, the best trombone player in the world, like, yeah, you might not have time to do all this stuff. So it's like I kind of had to shift my perspective to, I'm not just a trombone player, but I'm all of these things. And I'll admit it was kind of like a hard shift to make at first because like there's some days where I'm like, oh, I didn't play trombone at all today because I'm sitting here editing this video all day. So, that can be frustrating sometimes, but it comes in waves. Like for instance, this week I had a huge video project due. So I went and did a photo shoot and a video shoot and I was editing video all week and now I'm talking to all of you. And I've had a lot of that kind of stuff going on this week. But last week I was doing a huge remote recording project for a client, and I was just playing all week. So it really comes in waves depending on what's on my schedule. But I think there's that idea for me personally of my brand or what I do. I've shifted away from I'm just a trombone player. It's like I'm all of these things. And I just do my best to manage my time and make sure I still practice and get in that time on the horn because at the end of the day, my product is my trombone playing. So it's like that can't ever go away. But you just get good at time management or I don't know if good's the right word, but you just make it work. Always make time. So
Right. And everything that you're saying, I think we can kind of transpose onto the number of different career paths that people in this room are seeking, because this is a mixture of so many different paths of music education students, composition students, performance certainly. And what you said about creating your brand and creating a website, I mean, that's the very same for, say, like a music education student looking for jobs, like having some sort of online presence, kind of
yeah.
an online portfolio,
Hmm.
um, you know, and for them, maybe the YouTube channel would be more of a keeping all their rehearsal footage or teaching footage. So yeah, I mean, everything is very applicable, I think. So, I mean, just as a message to the students, you can definitely kind of translate some aspects of this to whatever you're doing as well. At least that's my feeling. Um,
Definitely.
awesome. Kind of switching gears, but maybe not so much. It's kind of hovering around similar things we've been talking about. Are there any skills that you've had to learn in your professional musician career that surprised you? Maybe it's these things we talked about with technology and the
Yeah.
branding piece, but or other things that you feel you've had to learn on the job beyond what we've talked about.
Yeah, definitely. I would certainly say I think just the networking side of it and the business side of it. At least
Hmm.
when I was in college, I didn't take any classes on those topics. There weren't a whole lot available. I don't know. Does your school have those kinds of classes?
Yeah, I mean, we have a whole department of entrepreneurship and career development that
Okay.
offers seminars on these things, luckily.
Hmm.
So I think that's a resource. I think a lot of students, and I mean, folks can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like a lot of students are increasingly doing like a double major in business or arts administration or things of that nature. But that's certainly not like baked into the curriculum. Like students have to go seek it, I think.
Yeah. But
So
yeah, that's great. That's why I asked.
yeah.
Yeah, I think just those business skills and especially things like negotiating contracts, if you're ever going to be working with, production companies or any large companies doing any sort of large production, negotiating contracts is a huge one. And that can get kind of like in depth, right? So that was something I felt like I did not learn at all in school was just like the business mindset of like, okay, you graduated school, you can play your horn, and then you like go out into the world and you're like, oh my gosh, like, so I would definitely say the more business side of things. So if you, yeah, have the opportunity to take a class on that or study any of that while you're in school, it's super important. I
Mhm.
definitely felt underprepared in that environment when I set out into the world. So I would
Yeah.
definitely say that, yeah.
Well, I mean, that's kind of perfect because one of the student questions, maybe we can kind of quickly skip over to that, is very related to this. If you're willing to kind of dive in a little deeper on that. The
Yeah.
question was, as a freelance musician who is also taking lessons, have you set up an incorporated business? If so, do you have any advice about this process? So it's very, very much akin to what we're talking about. Is there anything like on the business side that you can share in terms of like the steps that you took to be able
Yeah.
to do that?
Yeah. Does he mean like actually setting up like a business name and all that? Like
I suppose so. Yeah, I think so.
yeah, I
Jeff,
have.
was that actually your question? Oh yeah, so it was actually
Oh,
Jeff's
okay.
question. Yeah.
Well, it's a great question. I don't have the answer. I haven't done that yet. I mean, I have my online name, but I have not set up
Mhm.
an official business now. So,
I guess this would might be a good time to stick with some more questions as they're coming
sure.
in. The next question was, how did you gain experience playing different musical styles as a college student? Jazz, Latin, etc. Because obviously your ability to play a lot of styles has really paid off for you. So what would you say to that? Like, how did you gain that experience?
Yeah, well, I gained it in school, specifically when I went back for my master's degree. I was just at the ASU trombone studio at a time where I kind of lucked out. Like, there weren't a lot of players in the studio at that time. So it was like the players that were there were like doing everything. And I think in that first year back at my master's, I played in, it's funny you mentioned those styles. I played in the Latin jazz band. I played in big band. We had like a Dixieland band that would play at the football games. I did that. I did orchestra. I did band. I did, trombone ensemble and trombone quartet and brass quintet. I think I played in every musical ensemble at ASU. It was like I was just playing all day long. So
Mhm.
yeah, I just had that at school. I just made it a point to kind of be in or was asked to be in, every single like ensemble. And I was like, sure, I'll do that. Sure, I'll do that. I mean, it did get overwhelming at times, but I'm glad that I kind of had that opportunity in school to do that. Whatever your instrument is, you should at least have an understanding of all the musical styles that your instrument plays because you never know what you're going to get asked to play. And I'm telling you, I would have never guessed from back in college, but like that Dixieland style, like New Orleans stuff, I mean, I get asked to play that stuff all the time. It's kind of crazy. It's like, who would have thought, right? We're used to playing in concert band or big band or something like that, and it's just like all these little ensembles. I think it's very like valuable experience to play in all the kind of chamber kind of smaller ensembles.
Awesome. Great. Another question was, do you find different social media platforms have different functions or different uh, niches, niches between Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube? Does one seem to drive more traffic to your website than others? Do you spend more time on one than over the others? And is one better for interacting with people than others? So there's several questions there. Uh,
Yeah, the answer is yes, absolutely. They're all super different, and I think they can be different for different people. You'll start to realize where your audiences are. Getting a little more into the social media thing, I've certainly got really into it this past year, but it's important if you're doing it to like kind of map your analytics, and if you kind of get into it, you just start researching and you start seeing the trends and everything. For me personally. I think I have the largest audience on Facebook, but Facebook definitely has the older audience, in my opinion. A lot of my family members are kind of like, I don't know, maybe like 30 and older or 40 and older, like love Facebook. So Facebook is really good for that. And like I said, I think I have the largest audience there. I definitely consider YouTube like my primary platform. I definitely think that's the best place to share long form videos because people can go back and find them there. It's like you can also post videos on Facebook, but they're just harder to find. It's like you post it and then they kind of get lost forever. And then Instagram is actually my favorite platform to be on. I find it the best way to just communicate with people. There's a younger audience on there, and it's just a really good way to communicate. Like, I think for my audience, like people interact the most on Instagram. It just seems light and fun, and people are messaging back and forth and all that. But I think if you're gonna start doing the social media stuff for your music, like it's important to post on everything because you're reaching different people on different platforms. There might be some people that have all of them, but usually everyone has their favorite or one they kind of gravitate to more a little bit.
Yeah, I guess branching off of that, was there kind of an intention or like a goal when you're kind of crafting your online presence or your brand of, I'd like to reach younger musicians more so, maybe in these educational type kind of in short videos more geared towards like I saw one that actually you and your husband were doing in terms of like all state music prep for
Yeah.
high school music students. Was that like an intentional, like I want to direct a lot of my content there, or are you more kind of wide open, whoever wants to view. So what are your feelings with that?
Yeah, kind of what I've been saying with everything with this new journey into YouTube and social media and online and everything, it's just always been a giant game of trial and error. It's like throw stuff out there and see what sticks. So yeah, when we made those all state videos, yeah, that was definitely the intention to like reach a younger audience. Kind of moving away from those and doing other stuff. It's also like your audience will tell you who they are or what they want to see. And something that I started discovering through posting was probably a huge audience of mine that I never intended to reach, or it wasn't my goal to reach, are hobbyists. Like maybe people who are older and do something else for a career, like they're an engineer or they're a doctor or they're a manager at a store or whatever, and they love music and they want to get back into playing it, or maybe they play in a community band and they play on the weekends and they just want to like go to the internet to enjoy, trombone is what I play, so it's like they just want to go to the internet to consume that information. They want to learn, right? So they'll want to listen, or they just want to be entertained. So that's been kind of the amazing surprise that I've had doing social media, is like that there's a huge audience out there who is just really interested in consuming this content that's maybe not, a serious music student or even a professional musician. They just love music and want to see it and want to practice and they want to get better. It's their hobby. So,
Mhm.
and I know that's crazy for us to think as professional musicians, like, of music as a hobby, right? Because it's our job, but it's really cool to find people out there who like, they're just music lovers, they love music. It's their hobby and it makes them happy. And that's been a really cool thing for me to get to experience on social media, is connecting with this new audience of these people or musicians, because I feel like anyone's a musician who plays music, and that's been a really cool thing that I've gotten to experience.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, it certainly kind of, you're right, kind of changes your preconceived notions about um, what it is that you do or want to do, and
Yeah,
it makes you realize there's this whole population of people that are more casual observers or casual consumers.
yeah.
I know for me, just reflecting on what you're saying, I conduct a community group,
Hmm.
community band here in Bloomington, and I can definitely kind of relate with that. Like that, being involved with that group has really opened up my eyes into um, changing my own philosophies of how I teach, and that everyone should have music available to them.
Yeah,
So that's, I think that's wonderful.
yeah, definitely.
Uh, yeah. So one question I certainly wanted to get to for the benefit of everyone, and as I kind of mentioned before, people in this Zoom right now are studying at the Jacob School within several different areas of focus, right? So it's a pretty wide range, but even given that, do you have any advice that you'd give to all in order to get the most out of their time in music school?
Yeah, certainly. Some of it I've already touched on. Number one thing is practice. Like I already said, you're never gonna have this much time. Trust me. If I could go back, I would have practiced more when I was in school. Um, yeah, so definitely practice. The other thing is you have to realize, this is another thing that I could have told my younger self. You have so many great resources at your disposal. Being in music school, just the faculty that you have around you, I'm sure that, they're amazing. They've had amazing careers. They're full of knowledge. They're great resources. So I wouldn't be afraid to just kind of maybe reach out beyond your immediate bubble. You have your primary teacher, I'm sure, or the teachers within your immediate specialty. But if you're interested in something, go reach out to another teacher. At least from my experience in college, they were always more than happy to receive me or at least answer my questions. So just that idea of use these resources now while you have them while you're in school. Because when you go away, when you graduate and go move somewhere else, yeah, I'm sure you can always reach back, but it's just easier while you're in school. So if you have any other interests, like start doing them now. Start reaching out to people, networking, getting to know all the teachers. That can extend beyond the music school too. Like if you're interested in getting into, I don't know, photography or videography or media or business, or like something that you think is going to help you within your music career to have that other kind of skill set, you can also start doing that now in college. You have professors in all of those areas at your school, I'm sure. There might be clubs in that area or different students. Start to just use your resources. Being in college is just like there's resources all around you, and it's in a very confined space. So kind of just like realize, kind of everything you have before you, it's all right there. So just kind of really taking advantage of all the expertise you have around you, I would say.
Awesome. Yeah, and then I guess, again, you've touched on a lot of this, but especially when you talked about your time in music school and the types of different music that you perform. But do
Yeah.
you have any other lessons or skills or experiences that were the most valuable to you personally in your time in your training, beyond maybe what we mentioned?
Yeah, probably just the stuff we've mentioned already was that idea
Hmm.
of just trying to network with everybody. And then, yeah, just playing different musical styles. Or I guess that can even extend to taking classes in different topics that you're interested in. Just really using the opportunity to branch out and get to know as many people as you possibly can. Like when you graduate from your school, like it would be awesome if everyone in your music school and everyone on the faculty could be like, oh yeah, that's Jason. He plays the trumpet. These are his career goals. Like make that impact on all the students and all the faculty. Let them know who you are, where you're going, what you're doing. That way, over the years, if you have to reach out to somebody, get back in touch with them, that they're like, oh yeah, I remember them. So just really try to like make an impact, really try to just leave your stamp on that school before you kind of go off into the world.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And maybe we can stick with that networking piece because that seems to be, whenever I talk to students and when they ask me questions about that, that seems to be the most mysterious thing to them. Like, how do I network? Like
Yeah,
we say you should network, but and specifically, how do I do it and not feel kind of icky afterwards? Like
yeah,
like it's very transactional and like
yeah.
I'm just getting to know you because of what you can do for me, that kind of thing. Do you have any advice in that area of like genuine connection, as you mentioned before, and like a more genuine approach to networking?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'd say I've said this about a few other things. Is the only way to get good at it, or is just to do it, right? You just just rip off the band-aid and get in there. It's gonna feel awkward at first. It's gonna feel uncomfortable at first, especially depending on what your personality is, right? Like if you're naturally like a reserved or a shy person, you're probably gonna find it a little more challenging than if you're, a crazy extrovert. Yeah, it is kind of funny. We always talk about, well, how do we network? There's a few different ways. Probably the easiest way is by email. I'm thinking of one instance in my head right now where I wanted to take some lessons, and there was a new trombonist that moved to town. This is when I was living in Phoenix, and everyone was talking about how good this guy was, and like, and so I was like, I'm gonna email this guy for a lesson. And I even remember sitting down to like type the email, and I think it started with like, "Hi, you don't know me, but," and I just like typed up this email and just clicked send, and ended up meeting the guy for a lesson, and so it all worked out. But I think it's just that idea of, like I said it earlier, like being a shameless self promoter, right? You just have to just throw yourself out there, just know what your goal is, right? So if you want to be a performer, I would say, reach out to the performers in your area, the top players in your area. And a great way to do that is, like I mentioned, like take a lesson with them, because what that's going to do is going to, make a connection. They're going to hear you play. They're going to know that you're serious about the instrument if you want to get to, with them for a lesson. So that's one way to do it, is email people for a lesson. The other way that I used to network a lot was just going out and seeing live music. I know it's not really an option now, but hopefully that will be applicable again, is going to people's performances. And not only going to their performances, but afterwards, if you can, track them down. And, well, I don't want that to sound like creepy, but go find them and, go introduce yourself. Hi, my name is Lisa. I loved your performance. I love the way you play. Like that's great. I'm a music student. I do this, So just finding those opportunities to go to people's performances, support them, and then go talk to them. Again, it's just putting yourself out there. You just have to not be afraid to just go up to people and, throw yourself out there. And the more you do it, the easier it's going to be. And you can start practicing doing that now. Like I said, do it within your bubble, do it at school, do it with all your colleagues, right? Do it with, if there's like, if you're in a band class and maybe you don't know everyone in the entire band, make it your goal each band rehearsal. At the end of the rehearsal, you're going to go up to someone and introduce yourself, right? Maybe you're sitting in the back playing tuba and you don't know the oboe player up there. After rehearsal, walk up to them. Hey, hi, my name is blah, blah, blah. I play the tuba. What do you do? You know, and the more you get used to doing that, the more connections you're going to make. And then as far as making the connection genuine, I would definitely say it's finding something that you had in common. So, for instance, I was at a rehearsal earlier this week, and I was playing with a player who I'd never played with before. It always starts out usually with like, "Oh, where'd you go to school?" Or like, "Oh, you did this? Oh, do you know this person?" You know, and you start to build those connections. So usually once like a common bond is formed, then there's kind of like this level of trust. So just finding ways you can make actual genuine connections with people. And it doesn't even have to be career based, right? It could be like where they're from, right? Oh, you're from Phoenix? I'm from Phoenix. You know, it's like just those little things. I mean, you're connecting with humans, you know, it's just making those little connections and finding ways to find some common ground.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and in addition to that, I always tell my students to have to think almost with like a service mindset or just seeking to serve other people or help other people too, and that will
Yeah,
be kind of returned in kind through opportunities or
yeah.
other types of gigs and things of that nature. For performers, I would imagine, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, working with schools, like
Hmm,
going out and you know working with like band directors, orchestra teachers, maybe doing sectionals now and again and helping out some
definitely.
programs. Yeah. So yeah, there's a number of different things if you just kind of think outside the box, for sure. Well, great. I mean, are there any questions? I know we went through a couple questions that were listed, but this is the time if anyone has any additional questions. Yeah, Jack.
Hey, I just want to say I've enjoyed your presentation today. I was wondering what collaboration kind of looked like. You know, does having a really solid social media presence increase like the amount of times that you're kind of connecting with, because you were just talking about like connecting with people at the end of rehearsals, but there ever collaborations that are kind of fueled purely by interaction over social media, or does that still really require boots on the ground?
No, definitely. And that's kind of an importance, kind of what I was saying earlier of now that we're in this landscape, why it's so important to have a social media presence is like, I'm getting jobs off social media now. You know what I mean? Like, that's where people are finding you. So they're going to find your stuff on social media and then, hey, I need a trombone player. Will you record on this? You know what I mean? So I would say I use social media as like a means of advertising. You're advertising yourself, right? So absolutely. And then as far as doing, did you mean more like kind of business collaborations or more like the like YouTube kind of like that those kind of collaborations, like playing with other musicians? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's more of what I had in mind.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, that's all on social media. You know, I think I've gotten, you know, as you start to post content and post videos, you'll get messages from other people, and it's also been a great way for me to meet musicians during this time. You know, all online. So, to answer your question, yeah, it can all be done on social media and all done online. Yeah, good question.
Okay, well, I think that's actually a good place to wrap things up. And I just want to once again thank you, Lisa, and let's give another virtual awkward silent round of applause. But yeah, it's just so great to be able to for these students to be able to hear from the experiences of you and a real live professional freelance musician out in the real world. And not only that, but someone that's kind of navigated the complexities of what that means nowadays. So I just want to thank you so much on behalf of our students. And I think if I should be so bold as to kind of in summary, like for our students, it just seems like one takeaway is you can't just wait for the phone to ring. Like you have to be active rather than passive in your performing career and your career in general. So, yeah, so I think that's wonderful and a great message to kind of take away from this session. Well, great. Thank you once again, Lisa, and thank you everyone to join this session today. And that's where we'll wrap things up.